Welcome to the Authority File, the podcast that features conversations about the life cycle of scholarly communication. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. In this series, we're going to be talking about Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs for short, and the role academic publishers play in support of them. The SDGs, there are 17 of them, were developed in 2015 by the United Nations to address the effects of climate change and are expected to be met by 2030. As you might guess, academic publishers, particularly in the sciences, but also HSS, can and do play an important role in advancing our understanding, advocacy, and action with the SDGs. Ritu Dand, Chief Scientific Officer at Springer Nature, joins me on this four-part series to talk about how the research community, and Springer Nature in particular, are driving engagement and results with the UN's SDG program. In this second episode of our series, which is brought to you with generous support from Springer Nature, Ritu and I talk about the many ways in which Springer Nature has overhauled its editorial and business strategies to support the Sustainable Development Goals. What are some of the ways that Springer Nature's support of the SDGs have quite literally changed its editorial strategies, workflows? How have you kind of internally reorganized some of your editorial output around the SDGs?
So, obviously, growing SDG research is one of our main goals, and we've launched journals. We spend a lot of time and effort on educating researchers. Researchers didn't know what the SDGs were. If they aren't aware of the global challenges, they're not going to pivot their research to
Right.
help resolve the challenges. And in the early days, that involved, because there wasn't very much content, it involved a lot of commissioning and publishing thought leadership content. We host conferences. We ensure that the research that we publish in this space is made more accessible so that we get maximum reach for the content. There are multiple stakeholders involved with any one SDG. So anything that we publish needs to be understood and accessible from, different groups of scientists, but it's as well policymakers and industry. And I think that's one of the most difficult charges with the SDGs, the diversity of community that you have to penetrate.
Right.
And, since 2015, we've published over 800,000 articles in this space that have been cited nearly 10 million times. So that's an article volume increase of 118% since we started,
Wow.
since the SDGs were created. We're a leader in the SDG book space, and in 2022, we published nearly 4,000 books. We have living references that we have in the SDG space where, all the different chapters cover all the SDGs and they're living documents, so they're constantly being updated. We've used our platforms to engage the research community at large and make content more discoverable. And what does that mean? If we know that many of our researchers come to us via Google search, they don't want to read more than one scroll worth of content. So we have to make sure that the content we want to surface is at the top of the page.
Mm-hmm.
We want to ensure that the content is presented in the way that researchers want to read it. And, the whole publishing industry has been through a huge change over the last 5 years even. And now 50% of researchers come to us via social media platforms, which just wasn't happening over 5 years ago. And they're increasingly reading research on phones. So ensuring our content is both being promoted on social media platforms, and fit for consumption on mobile devices takes a lot of time and extra investment. And we're also looking for ways to support industry to publish with us. So ensuring that technology firms, we can compromise on, patent needs and published data. We work with marketing to ensure that we're building readers from industry, because we know that, for scale up for much of this research, industry needs to engage. And we're also making sure that the research is accessible, so all the different stakeholders
Yeah.
can engage.
Ritu, that's a terrific overview. What does that look like, sort of on the ground in more detail?
So, as I said, the SDGs require experts from lots of different professions to come together in order to successfully resolve any one goal. So, one of the biggest initiatives that we put into play was to create communities around the SDGs. So let me give you an example of what this means. So let's take SDG 7, for example, which is to ensure universal access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all by 2030. So, in order to see an improvement in energy efficiency within the research community, you will need research from material scientists, chemists, physicists. While they sound like they might have overlapping goals, they actually talk very different languages. And they also have very different journals. We need to bring them together. In order to facilitate access to the research and technology and promote investment in energy infrastructure, we need to bring in economists, industrialists, policymakers. And then to expand infrastructure and upgrade technology, we need to bring in city planners and manufacturers. So that is the broader SDG community for the energy goal. And so we launch new journals which has content which appeals to these experts. We use formats that these communities are used to reading, and we ensure that the journal is marketed across these different communities. And then we need to have journals at every impact level. So from our highest impact journals like Nature and our very prestigious academic journals to more specialist journals, and then the Discover portfolio, which is a more inclusive portfolio, and we'll talk about that later. We also want to offer different publishing models. So there's subscription content, there's hybrid, there's open access content. And we do all of that to engage all researchers across the world. We, because of all these different specialists that are involved, and because of the high level of jargon that every such community will speak, we need to ensure that the content is accessible. And we do this by creating visually appealing, easy to read lay summaries, which highlight the policy or the clinical or the technical aspect of the research. We commission and create journalistic content to engage consumer audience as well as policymakers. So it's a huge effort, even with the content that we are creating, to make it accessible to so many different types of individual.
Okay. So aligning your content with the SDGs seems like it needed a fairly significant business strategy rather than simply an idealistic posture. What were the business factors that had to be considered in that transition?
So it's a bona fide effort that we believe in. We want to be the first choice publisher for researchers. Um, And in order to do that, they need to know that we genuinely believe and we genuinely care. So while we will publish across all 17 SDGs, there is a subset where we believe Springer Nature has a more direct role to play. And that is the SDGs that revolve around climate change, education, and partnerships for goals. And last year, we expanded this group to include gender equality and reduced inequalities. And this was to reflect our dedication to diversity, equity, and inclusion in publishing. And we believe we do make a powerful difference in all these areas. So let me give you an example. The SDG to limit climate change. So Springer Nature has shared over 60,000 research articles and book chapters since 2015. We act on limiting climate change in our business. We ensure there's an operational responsibility between our aims and how we achieve them. We have science-based targets which have formally been validated, and we aim to be net zero by 2040. And in order to support this, we have chosen carbon offsetting forestry projects that we are supporting and working with. And, our efforts have been acknowledged. We've been shortlisted for the SDG Impact in the Reuters Responsible Business Awards, and we were also awarded a silver EcoVadis rating for our operational sustainability. And moreover, each year we publish our sustainable business reports, which is it's easy for me to say, and it looks like this beautiful glossy brochure that comes out. Actually, the next one's about to come out. But it takes us most of the year to gather all the data. But it's so worth the effort. When you see all our achievements summarized in one place, it's so exciting for us, all our staff, and hopefully all our editors and readers.
Excellent. Can you talk about some of the ways these strategies have materialized from a customer point of view?
Yeah. So we're now in our fifth year. We work with the UN Sustainable Development Solution Network to engage experts in any one field. Last year, the theme was to deliver clean and affordable energy for all. So we invited a host of experts to engage in a series of panel discussions over a few days about the biggest challenges and potential ways forward. We then worked with these experts to collate their thoughts and made some key policy recommendations, which were then shared and published in the form of a white paper, which was made accessible to all and heavily promoted on our website. And that's a fantastic thing to be able to do. Our education division, Macmillan Education, has also worked with the UN to introduce SDG content into the education curriculum into classrooms. And I'd encourage you to look at the Advancing Futures series, which is a program designed to introduce sustainability, diversity, equity, and inclusion into the classrooms around the world. And so we create resources for teachers to support them share knowledge and develop their skill sets. And we engage students. And these are primary school children. I don't know what that is in America. Yeah, little.
Right.
we engage them we give them the power to be change makers. So we teach them about sustainability, and then they're encouraged to make their own contributions into this wider forum using videos. So it's a fantastic way of inspiring the next generation of individuals who will be responsible for ensuring that our planet is sustained.
Mm-hmm.
We also attend lots of meetings, particularly the Science Summit at the UN General Assembly, which 79 United Nations engage with. More broadly, we work with our authors to find out what their attitudes are to the SDGs. We learn about weaknesses in our comms, and this affects what we do moving forward. And finally, we've created content hubs to enhance discovery by collating the content that's published across all our journals. We have consumer content, which is created by our journal, magazines like Scientific American and Nature's News Team. And we create content specials in the form of highlights. And we try and use multimedia, podcast, video to increase accessibility, as well as translating the content into various languages, including German and French. And these content hubs are very successful. They were last year visited nearly 200,000 times, just to sort of give you an impact of the scale that we're working at.
You just heard from Ritu Dand, Chief Scientific Officer at Springer Nature. This episode was brought to you with generous support from Springer Nature. Join us next week for our third episode as we discuss inclusive science and concrete ways to engage the Global South. As always, underwriting opportunities for the Authority File podcast are directed by Choice's advertising director, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced and edited by Choice's digital media producer, Sabrina Kofer, with support from digital media assistant Ashley Roy. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.